Yeah, I remember I was really surprised the first time in the first one when I saw this type of scene, and
Yeah.
really enjoyed also for this type of. It was never free. It was also in the story very
Yes.
good.
Yep.
So yeah, I really like this movie. So I aspire to become a screenwriter myself. I'd like to know about your writing process. How do you
Mhm.
go for the first ideas to a final version of your script? Do you have any particular techniques? Do you share your scripts for feedback sometimes?
Yes. Well, my favorite part of a process is the beginning, right? Where everything is available to you and there's no boundaries or roadblocks at this point. You're just kind of throwing everything up in the air and see. I usually have a first act in my head, right? And a character
Okay.
and a world, right? And I kind of have an ending, some version of an ending, right? Good or bad or whatever that is, I know it goes there. And the rest of it sort of is the character's journey. And also my process is um, not to outline anything, right? And so I like to write the movie as if I was watching it. And if I know that the next scene will be between him and her on the bus stop, it's probably not a scene I should write because I've seen that scene and that's where it's supposed to go. And your job as a screenwriter ultimately is when someone reads it, they can't stop turning the page. That's my goal. It's like when I'm writing, you better not be able to stop and go, I'll stop here and pick it up later. You can't. I kind of figure out a way to write it in a way in which it's unfolding like a movie and unexpected. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. I also feel it's good to surprise yourself as a writer, right? Because you're a screenwriter, you watch movies, you went to film school, you've seen so much, right?
Yeah.
The last thing
Yeah.
you want to do is write something and say, well, I think there's a danger to writing towards something. That's the other thing.
Mm.
So if you say, okay, I know they have to have a big fight in the police station, and you
Yeah.
start writing everything to get to the police station, you're handcuffing yourself in terms of your characters and their behaviors and things like that. So I got an idea there's a scene like that in there, and maybe it does not in the police station, maybe it's in the police car. I don't know, but I'm just kind of going to see where this takes me, and if I'm surprised. Um, then I think it's going to be exciting. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love that moment where you're like, I've seen this before, and I know where this is going, and I don't really want to write it because blah blah blah, and then you just go,
Mm.
So that's my process. I write, and I would encourage everybody to. Uh, I write about 5 drafts before I turn it in. So my first draft is gone through it 5 times. And that means I've given it to producers, I've given it to people I trust, to make sure I'm not going off any rails or there's something that's confusing or I think it's great and they think it sucks. Um, so I'm going through this and then I'm writing it and I'm rewriting it. And I usually write the first act 3, 4, 5 times to make sure because I
Okay.
don't think if you get the first act wrong,
Mm.
you're wrong the rest of the way. So hone that down, get that down, and then the middle of the film is where most screenplays fall apart, right? They kind of
Yeah.
trying to get to the end and a lot of conveniences or things like that happen and that's where people go, oh, really, that was gonna how did he get that or how did he do that or whatever, and just to get there. So that's where you got to be really smart. And so I think those
Mm.
are the times where you really just go, I know people are reading 35 pages of my screenplay and it's all good. And I'm getting to this place where I gotta, he's gonna get on the road and they're gonna be bored. They're gonna want to get ahead to see where he ends up. So how do I stop that?
Mm.
What would make them
Yeah.
keep reading, keep watching? It's an art into itself, but it's also a storyteller's thing. It's like
Mm.
if you read Dickens and if you read even Elmore Leonard, if you read any kind of really good writer, you don't really know where it's going, or you think you're going to know, and then something else happens. And
Mm.
so I find if you outline it, I find I get bored writing it. Like I've already
Yeah.
figured it out, and I'm like, all right, I got to write the scene where they do this, and they don't seem to flow.
Mm.
So that's my process. I started out. outlining vamp, like scene for scene for scene for scene for scene, and then going back and putting dialogue in it. And by the time I was finished, I was like, I don't even want to direct it. It's like it's already finished. It's like, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like it's a very mundane process. So that's
Mm.
my process. Some people like cards and
Yeah.
picking out their movies. And you could do that, I guess, if you do the same process, which is I don't want to uh I need to surprise myself. So even when I'm carding out the movie, do not feel like I just want to get to the big set piece and then she's kidnapped and
Yeah.
that's it's harder to do that if you're just writing actual scenes and
Mm.
not just going, oh, and then this happens and then this happens and
Mm.
then they kidnap her and then he does that and he does that. It's hard for me.
Mm. Yeah, for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you have the first idea, and I'm always trying to find another way because it's the first idea that came up in your mind. But you
Yes.
have, if you change the place or just an object or some things, or maybe remove the dialogues, and it's more about the look and yeah,
Yeah.
I think it can change everything.
It can. And again, you have to sit with it and then you put it on a paper and I'm always imagining someone reading it. I'm always very aware that someone is going to have to sit and read this.
Yeah.
So the words I choose, how little words I choose, or when I choose to use the words are important because
Mm.
that's all. Someone told me once, early in my career, oh, I know what it was. I shot some test footage on the movie Scalper that turned out just a ticket with Andy. We shot it. We just went out and shot some scenes and improv and stuff like that and cut it together.
Yeah.
We showed it to the studio and the studio flipped out. They're like, wait, I didn't even think the movie looked like, what do you mean? I imagined the movie a different way.
Mm.
And the guy said, I'll never read a script the same way again. And I thought, no, you read the script the right way. I didn't write it the right way, right? So I didn't make you see what I saw.
Mm.
And so he told me, he says, imagine your script sitting on a desk with 20 other scripts.
Mm.
That's what they do. They get a bunch of scripts. They don't do it today.
Yeah.
It's all digital. But in the old days, they'd have a pile of scripts they'd have to get through on the weekend. And
Yeah.
your script's in there somewhere. And they're reading script after script. And they don't want to read every fucking line. And they want to get through and they want to know, is this any good? 20 pages, not good. They put it away. So imagine somebody taking the time, an actor, right, an investor, a producer, or somebody, the studio, whatever, sitting down and actually reading your work. And they should not be able to stop reading until the end. Right? They should want to know, they should be invested in your character or characters. They don't want them to die, they don't want them to get kidnapped or whatever it is. They want them to succeed. Will they, won't they, whatever that is, and they want to know. And your job is to stop them from trying to jump to page 80 to find out. Your job is to basically go, oh, where'd that come from? Who's that? How I didn't know, all the way to the end. So if you imagine someone reading it just like you read it, and I'm sure you read screenplays, and you get to a place and you're like, okay, move on, hurry up, So I think that's the other thing I think I'd encourage writers to do. It's writing is so hard and it's thankless. Most of what you write, as professional screenwriters do not get made. I mean, I've gotten lucky in the last 10 years or so, most of them got made, but before that, none of them got made, right? You're like, and until I realized I should work for filmmakers and I should be talking filmmaker language. Just imagine that someone's going to take an hour to read your work. And when you're reading it and looking at it, I know you see it in your head, but do they see the same thing? Right?
Yeah.
And do they feel? It's interesting. Denzel pointed out something we would sit in the production office and go through the scripts every day. And one day he said, "What's this?" I go, he says this. I go, how do I act that? Right? I looked at it and there's no way to act it. It's an internal description, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I finally, I was embarrassed, right? I'm like, I don't know. And I realized I know why that's there. That's not for you. That's for the studio. That's for the studio to understand the feeling of this scene and what you're feeling. You can act it and you can say nothing or do anything, but there's a shot of her and the girl and the thing, and it'll all play. But they don't see the shots or anything else. I have to make them feel. So I write in this internal thing where he's thing and he goes, okay, well, okay. So that's
Yeah,
part,
I see.
I realize that's part of, there's two screenplays, the one that they read and decide to make, and the one that you actually shoot. There's
Yeah.
two, right? Then you can go in and put the interior, exteriors, and I don't use those a lot, right? I just,
Yeah.
I don't use, standard stuff because they're hard to read.